I'm Allison Van Dyke. I'm Executive Director of the Temple of Understanding. And I'm very happy to welcome you all to this January Eco Justice for All dialogue program of the Temple of Understandings, entitled COP28, A New Era in Climate Action Globally. This series is an ongoing program of the Temple of Understanding, a 63-year-old interfaith organization whose mission is to advocate for interfaith values in the secular setting of the United Nations and as an NGO around the world. Our focus for the past 12 years has been to increase the awareness of religious leaders and actors of our climate crisis and its negative impact on achieving the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, peace, justice, women's health and safety, food sovereignty, and ensuring a healthy planet for all. It's my pleasure today to introduce our moderator, Executive Director of GreenFaith, Reverend Fletcher Harper, and also our speakers for today, Nina Firman, Karen Mapusua, Lucy Plummer, Lauren Van Ham. So I'm turning it over to you, Fletcher, and I am so looking forward to this dialogue between all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison, and many thanks to the Temple of Understanding for hosting this, and good greetings to everybody who's joining us. I'll note right at the outset that Karen very sort of generously is, and she's based in Fiji, and it's 3 a.m. there, and she's dealing with a spotty internet connection. So she'll be joining us. Here she comes back right now, but that's where Karen is located. I wondered if we could do a quick go round so that our listeners could get a sense of who they've got the good fortune to listen to. And I wonder, maybe Lucy, would you start, and then we could go to Lauren, and then Nana, and then to Karen.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you all. My name is Lucy. I'm based in the UK, in London. I work for the Soka Gakkai International Office for UN Affairs, part-time, focusing on youth. So my background is really kind of youth engagement, particularly with the SDGs, and mobilizing and supporting youth to take action. That's me.
Super. Thanks, Lucy. Lauren, over to you.
And my name is Lauren Van Ham. Pleasure to be with you all. I live in California on Lashawn Ohlone lands, and I serve as the United Religions Initiative Coordinator for Climate Action and Earth Restoration. Great to be here.
Super. Nana.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and my name is Nana Firman. I'm based in Riverside, California, but originally I'm from Indonesia, and I'm with GreenFaith, which is a grassroots global interfaith network for climate action and also for environmental justice.
Super, thanks. Karen, great to see you. And I've let everybody know that we all owe you a debt of gratitude for your interrupting your sleep for us tonight. But tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah, no problem. Really happy to be here. Yeah, Karen Mapusua. I'm the director of the Land Resources Division at the Pacific Community, which is an organisation that's intergovernmental and provides scientific and technical support to the 22 countries and territories of the Pacific. I'm also president of IFOAM Organics International, a global peak body for the organic agriculture movement.
Great. Well, welcome. And as Allison said earlier, my name's Fletcher Harper. I'm based in New York City, and I'm the executive director of GreenFaith and Nana's colleague. So first question is for, I believe that Karen and Lucy and Nana were each at COP28 in person. So I'd love to hear from each of you. Share your overall sense of the COP, its outcomes, and also the fact that for the first time there was a faith pavilion and what that was like. Give us a little bit of paint the picture for us in a variety of ways. And Lauren, will bring you in also around the outcomes. But Lucy, I'm particularly, this was a COP where youth had reason to be concerned going in. I mean, the host was again a major oil producing country. From a youth perspective, what did you see, and how did this COP feel to you?
Yeah, thank you so much. So this was the third COP that I had attended, COP26 being my first, and going to COP27 and COP28. And, as a youth with no kind of background in policy, it takes a while to just orient into that, monster, I would say, to just really kind of get acquainted and to see what's happening and how it works. So it's been a very steep learning curve, I would say. This COP, particularly COP28, my personal experience was very different to previous COPs. This was actually the first COP where meaningful youth engagement was a negotiated item. So that was significant for me because kind of I see that there's almost like two COPs happening at the COPs. There's like the negotiations, and then there's kind of the pavilions where, different stakeholders do events and engage. And as a youth, you're not part of the negotiations officially, really. Most youth are kind of in the pavilion side. So that is the negotiations are such like an elusive space. Like you don't know what's happening or what goes on there. So the youth item being negotiated meant kind of that the negotiations were brought to us because we were one of the key stakeholders that were being consulted on the youth climate champion role, which was an initiative by the COP28 presidency. And that was really significant because we were no longer, I personally felt like it brought me closer to actually how this mechanism works and actually what is involved in negotiations, in discussions. I kind of, in my head, very disenchanted with the process, didn't know how it worked, didn't know how to have any impact at all, any influence. Even though I was at the COPs, it was like, I'm here, but I don't know like how I can influence or impact anything. So actually having this youth item on the agenda and being part of consultations, it demystified a lot of things in my mind. And actually for me, it gave me a lot of hope. It gave me an understanding that these are people who are, negotiators are people, and, our hearts and minds can be influenced and changed. And, it's not like it's just a mechanism, it's actual human beings. And I spend some time, talking to country negotiators, which I'd never had that experience before. And you get to see actually when you understand how something works, then you can get a sense of actually I might be able to even create some kind of influence and change. So for me, COP28 was important in that aspect with the youth negotiated item because it just brought the consultations to youth, which has not really happened before. We're always trying to chase the negotiation. So I feel a renewed sense of hope that actually, from understanding how a process works, then you can start to like try to make some influence. So honestly, that was the kind of big thing that for me that was different to this COP20 to the other COPs.
Thanks. Thanks, Lucy. Karen, I'm curious from your perspective. Obviously, as a Pacific Islander, the Pacific Islands have played an absolutely vital role in leadership for climate justice around the world in so many ways. I wonder how this COP felt to you and what you thought of its outcomes.
Yes, extremely disappointed. To sum it up, and I think that is the feeling across the entire Pacific. We went in, as always, optimistic. I totally agree with Lucy. There's two worlds at the COP. There's the pavilions, which are inspirational and exciting, and then there's the negotiations. And the negotiations let down the most vulnerable this year in a significant way. For us, the icing on the cake was the final decisions being made without the small island states being in the room and it being gavelled through. that was possibly the most unjust thing we've seen at a COP so far. So yes, a lot of loss of faith in the process at the moment. For me personally, wondering how it could be turned around at future COPs, how we can actually call on the humans that are in the room, so that our humanity can overcome the political will and the desire for economic gain of a few that is, in the end, dominating some of these decisions.
Yeah. And let's come back to that theme or that topic you raised, Karen, about the legitimacy of the COP process, perceived and real, and dig into that in a little bit. Nana, I'm curious from your perspective. Obviously, this was the second COP in a row in a Muslim majority country, with the prior COP having been in Egypt, and you've been such a leader in the Muslim climate world for many years now. What did you see in that world of Islamic Muslim-led climate activism and climate efforts leading up to this COP, and tell us a couple of stories about that.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So I think like for this COP, I mean, in general, I'm the same as Karen, like we are very disappointed in terms of like the result and the process also. But I mean, like in terms of like from the faith like communities, the like, you know, the like faith-based activists, I think like this, because this time we have a faith pavilion. This is the first time at COP. So like in the like preparation, I see more and more like the Muslims activists have like, you know, preparation and very excited to be part of this COP. And then during the COP itself, as Lucy mentioned, there were two things happening at the same time, the negotiation and the outside with all the different pavilions. But I've seen the faith pavilions very striving, and I felt that this is what we needed. Like for a long time, we were looking forward to have like our own pavilion, because, you know, like we've been very engaged, the faith communities, for several COPs, and the thing is like we were always like all over the place, but this time we have like one place where we can share, have a dialogue, like exchange like ideas. And so I think this is a very powerful one, like in terms of experience as a faith-based movement. And you know, like it is just nice to have a like a physical place where we can meet. Not even like, you know, sometimes I just like being there, not even having any session or speaking, but I just wanted to meet people and like, you know, have exchange and conversation. So I think like there's a lot of thing happening because of having a physical faith pavilion. And also like we work with like, you know, like kind of come up with the statement to the COP presidents, like from the interfaith statement. And like, you know, Pope Francis and Sheikh Al-Taib from Al-Azhar were supposed to be there, but, you know, because of the health reason, they couldn't make it. But, you know, it was a great thing, because we had this faith pavilion. And I'm hoping that this is not just a one things, you know, kind of like thing for a COP, but hopefully we will have the faith pavilion for you know, next COP also, where we can engage from the all different faith based organization and interfaith organization to, you know, like have more fruitful, and also like we can influence also like the COP itself.
Thanks, Nana. Lauren, you were following the COP closely from California and creating updates for the United Religions Initiative community about it. What did you see on the outcomes side of the equation?
Yeah, certainly. I was part of a live stream every day called the COP Drop, where we were speaking with folks on the ground in Dubai. And I absolutely resonate with everything that's been shared so far in terms of, you know, kind of micro wins and huge disappointments. I think that resonates. it was useful, I think, to have these live streams where we were creating a bridge between what was so specific to Dubai and sharing it with other parts of the world. And I just will kind of piggyback a little bit, Nana, on what you were saying. I know from because of the Faith Pavilion and some intentional PR attention that was placed there, that this COP did receive more than 4,000 media releases that focused on a faith presence at COP. And I'm also, just in the study that I did, it was like 7% of the COP stories mentioned faith. So, you know, something did happen there. I will say that URI is a network of cooperation circles, and we had cooperation circle members in Dubai, and their input on what they were learning and participating in absolutely agrees with what has been stated already, the importance of Indigenous voices, the importance of youth voices, and the incredible confusion and disappointment in what was supposed to happen and hasn't.
So we've got these sort of interesting themes emerging. On the one hand, more audiences feeling like there is a place for them in the COP environment writ large, sort of jarringly juxtaposed with the inadequacy of the outcomes. So what do we make of this? I mean, I'm curious, you know, there has been discussion about, in many circles, about the inadequacy of the COP process, the lack of outcomes, not just this year, but for for decades now. And I'm curious, from each of your own ethical, religious perspectives, what are your thoughts on that? What would your message be to the COP process about what needs to happen to make it worth the while and to make it sort of fit for purpose? Karen, let me start with you, maybe, just to put you on the spot.
Yes, definitely on the spot with that one. Look, I think I'm really torn over that. One part of me says what we need to do is just have the negotiators together and forget all the rest, and focus on that political work. But the pavilion space and what happens there does influence over time the negotiations. So that's also critical as well, to keep that going. I think continuing to make sure the right voices are there is really important, and that the right things are being negotiated and referenced in the texts. The constituency group's role and how they engage, I think, really needs to be strengthened. For example, farmers are not mentioned in any of the texts, but they're one of the most vulnerable groups and can have the most impact on climate change through the food systems. They're not referenced at all. So that's really critical. I think going forward, the role of things like the pavilion and the fact, and the Reverend from in the Pacific Climate Pacific Warrior event, percentage of world leaders that refer to them as people of faith, and it was a significant. Why aren't we on that? Happens in we've got, I think, an underutilized tool of our humanity and our links through being people of faith that we need to call on more strongly in this process. But it's really, really complex. I think the COP has a role still, definitely, but what we do outside of that and parallel to that, I think, is also just as important at this point in time.
You know, we hear from many activists within the faith world and beyond that same sort of sentiment about, you know, clearly you've got to have a forum where countries come together, but how long, oh Lord, how long? You know, the work that's needed to be done is very clear. There needs to be a phase out of fossil fuels. There needs to be large commitments by historic polluters to loss and damage and to just transition. And there are a host of other sort of details under those sort of high level headings, but the glaciers are receding far faster than the negotiations are proceeding, and that's just continuing to be a challenge. Lucy, I'm curious. Soka Gakkai is a global Buddhist network. You're involved with Buddhist youth from around the world. What are you feeling from the community that you're part of with this? I think we all understand that this issue impacts youth in a unique kind of way, and I'm curious from the heart what it is that you're sort of seeing, feeling, hearing from the youth around this COP and about the issue more broadly.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think youth are really feeling they're kind of, let down. We've kind of accepted that is the situation. So what are we going to do about it? Just kind of, give up and, and just, let the future unfold as we feel it is unfolding? Or actually, are we going to stand up and actually do something about it, demonstrate, leadership that we feel is necessary to make the changes? So I feel that youth are, really just kind of wrestling with this internal struggle, and they have been, and actually coming out of it on the other side and feeling empowered that actually we will stand up. It's our future too. It's not something that will just continue in this cycle of expectation and disappointment, but what are we going to do about it? And the more that I talk to youth, especially in the COP space, the more we talk about, well, what are we going to do when we get back home? It's all good, coming to these spaces, but COP is not the only place where climate action takes place. And what we're really trying to do is, have these discussions, keep these connections going, throughout the COPs, but actually the real work for us happens when we go back home. And throughout the year, we're coming together and we're talking about how we can spread awareness to our friends, how we can have, the courage to speak to our kind of, seniors in faith and say, we're not doing enough. What can we do? And have those frank discussions. I think, it's about how we can become the leaders, but not in a way that is, trying to create conflict with anyone else, or but just how can we develop our capacities and confidence to rise to the challenge of what's happening and not just accept defeat. So this is something that I feel is growing among the youth, the confidence and the conviction in the power of ourselves to actually make a difference, no matter how small it may feel, that we all have a part to play, and we cannot just, expect governments or corporations to change, but the change has to start from us. So I would say that's the main awakening that's happening with youth, that feeling empowered and then, just trying to do what we can.
Great. And Lauren and Nana, sort of similar question for both of you, but framed about the role of faith. There was a faith pavilion. There were a lot of presentations. A teacher of mine many years ago in seminary said, don't make the assumption that all religion is a good thing. Like anything else, there's good religion and lukewarm religion and religion that can be a problem also. So what should define really strong religious leadership on this issue? What is it that religious groups did? What were some examples at COP that you saw of religious groups doing work the right way? And, not asking for naming names, obviously, or anything like that, but were there concerns that you had about the way in which religions, any kinds of religion showed up? I mean, as an example that we're all aware of, there are extremist and right-wing leaning religious groups around the world that have a fairly strong pro-extractivist agenda and are part of the right-wing political movements that are helping drive the climate crisis. So give us an honest, sort of unvarnished take on What should religious groups be doing? Where did you see some good examples about that? Were there any worrying trends also? Lauren, let's start with you, even though I know you were from a distance, but what did you see? And I'm trying to, I know that as religious people and groups, we're sometimes hesitant to speak in a manner that might be perceived as critical of religion, but we're a big body. And if we're going to step into these spaces, I think it behooves us to have that kind of capacity. So I'm curious to hear what you think.
I would say, and again, you know, I can't speak to some of the specificity of Dubai, but what I will say is that from a grassroots perspective, that one of the places where I really believe that faiths can be doing something good is education. There are many faith groups who are already doing such powerful work in the space of climate action and education around regenerative work in the land, in the water that matters, right? And while that is going on, Fletcher, to your point, there are plenty of other faith groups that have paid that no attention. They might even be working in an opposite direction. But what about that group of faith groups who are maybe a little more moderate in the middle, and they are just not aware that they can be potent, that they can lead this movement, and they can show up in their local spaces and start to really, really educate and promote ideas that would bring more peace and more justice and more healing. And there's urgency around that. So one other thing that I would just say in response to some things that you shared, Lucy, in response to the generations that are going to be inheriting this, I think that faith groups can be doing a visionary thing by giving examples of what a regenerated world looks like, of what a healthy, healing community looks like when fossil fuels are not in the equation and when faith and nature work together. And there are some really good examples of that, but it's hard to work towards something if we can't quite imagine it. And so I would like us to be able to look to the faith groups that are doing some really visionary stuff and say, this is what we're working toward, this. So Nana, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, like, before I jump into that, I wanted to comment on the process, like the question for Karen. So the process itself, I think, like, we are trying to transition out from from fossil fuels, but yet in reality, there's like more fossil fuel companies representative in COP. So it's like, how do we even do that? Like, you know, so that I think like this like, you know, is disproportionate of, you know, like of representation, as mentioned, that we need people who like the right voices to be in the room, because if there's like more fossil fuels lobbyists, like, you know, who are in the room, then how are we going to make that happen, you know, like to phase out fossil fuels? So that is like one of my criticism, like, you know, how can we change this process, that we have like more representative that, you know, are supposed to be in the room, like, you know, the voices that we need to hear, like, you know, like as you mentioned, like the farmers are not being mentioned and they are being affected, you know, like directly. So I think that needs to be like, you know, like we need to criticize on that and to be loud, you know, like about that process. And in terms of like from the faith communities, I think you mentioned that about education. I think that's like Lauren, like, you know, like education is the strength of faith communities, but also I think like what I've seen in this in the faith pavilions, either my own sessions or like other people's sessions, is the real like, you know, the real like real implementations and the success and even the failure that they face, that people can relate, right away, and then they can bring to their homes that we could do that also, or like we can collaborate. So it's like, and there's like, so that becoming like interventions. I think like I've seen these interventions like during like, like sessions in the faith pavilions, that we need to kind of like highlight these interventions, because, like those are like amazing work, but sometimes it's not being highlighted as part of the solutions of this climate crisis from the grassroots community. So it needs to be like, we need to be louder on this, like spread this amazing like, work, and also like spread it out, like, like kind of like implement that in many places in the world. Also, it's not just a few places, but, kind of like, share that bigger. So then, like we wanted to show to the leadership, the world leadership, that the faith communities are doing the work, and we're serious on this. We're not like waiting for them to like, have like a proper negotiation. We are doing our work, but then they also need to listen to us, that we want the change, like as soon as possible.
Sharon, to put you on the spot again, in addition to whatever you were just about to say, I would love to have a message from you to the people of faith from around the world who are on this call, listening to you all. What would be your message as a leader in the Pacific Islands on this? I know you also were going to say something else, but I think sometimes people need to have that kind of direct request or ask made of them. But please, I know you were saying something else also.
Actually, what I was going to say probably supports that message as well. So that works. I think it's really important that that communities of faith realize that they do have enormous influence, but it doesn't happen at COP. It happens starting now for COP in November this year. I think if we are going to have influence as people of faith and communities of faith in this process, we need to be educated about it and understand how it works. And I think there's a huge value in the faith pavilion at COP and raising awareness there. I was only able to drop in once for about 5 minutes, but it was great. And I think we need those spaces. I was mostly in the negotiation space. Being able to go somewhere and get a little bit of restoration really is helpful. But yeah, my message is start now. Learn about the process and start talking to the people of influence in your governments now, because by the time everyone gets to COP, national positions are set pretty much, and it's very hard to get significant shifts in that space. We need to be building that shift now. And yeah, calling on everyone's humanity, I think that's really, really critical. And I will also say, I mean, there is a power in prayer. The Pacific comes together in our pavilion during COP several times for prayers together. We also had it with the small island states this year. I think continuing to use everything that was within our power to influence this process and its outcomes is really critical.
Thank you so much. So turning at sort of following, Karen, some of the things that you just said, and turning our attention to the months to come and the year to come, I'm curious about, maybe to start with you, Lucy, what are some of the priorities? What are some of the most important actions or activities that you envision for Soka Gakkai youth in particular, and for youth of faith on this? Are there some things that come to mind that you feel are top priorities?
Yeah, thank you. I would say, again, we have to learn about the process. We cannot think that, it doesn't impact us, or it doesn't involve us, or we can't make a difference. We each have to understand that we are such a crucial part of decision making in governments, in society, and unless we step into that role and really overcome negativity, whether that be fear, distrust, apathy, laziness, whatever it is that is preventing us really from kind of just engaging in whatever level. I think that yeah, so in terms of like activities, ones that are educating, ones that are bringing the COPs to the grassroots, bringing about the SDGs. So we have big youth festival that's happening in Japan, a regional level one, about the SDGs and action, engaging thousands of young people in that region who may not have necessarily thought about the SDGs. Sometimes these governmental agendas can seem so far removed from reality that one think what's the point in engaging. So actually bridging that gap between these kind of high level agendas and the grassroots, because the SDGs is unique from other development agendas that were created by governments for governments. The SDGs were created in a very consultative process where civil society and public were able to fill out surveys and attend consultations and give their vision of a sustainable future to the UN. So that I think that's important to know, because we were part of the process of creating this. So we have a responsibility to make sure that the SDGs actually are achieved, and we're not just leaving that for governments and other stakeholders to work on, but each one of us saying, I will achieve the SDGs. So developing that sense of responsibility, I think that's the main thing, really connecting youth with these actions and cultivating this sense of responsibility, and also that hope that my small action, whatever it is actually making a difference. And it's so important. It's the difference between acting and non-acting is as different as night and day. So we must really just decide to act, really.
I like that. Just decide to act. So Nana, I'll turn the mic to you next. I'll stay in my moderator role, but we at GreenFaith have a big global mobilization coming up. Maybe you could say a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. And so I forgot to mention earlier on the first question about, like the Muslim engagement, like, like how I see in this, specifically in this COP, like, so with the Alliance of Ummah for Earth, we actually release the demands, which is one of them is climate justice and equity. And then I'm going to shift to what, from GreenFaith, this is what we are preparing, like as part of what Karen mentioned, we have to prepare now, not wait until November or October, close to the COP. So part of what we are going to do in GreenFaith, we have this action that we already did previously. It's called Faith for Climate Justice. This year is going to happen in May. And I just got back from Indonesia just a few days ago, and we already started in Indonesia, and our colleagues and our network in Indonesia, we started with what is climate justice from different faiths. So when I was there, I was giving the training on what is climate justice from the Islamic perspective. And then next week, I think we're going to have on the climate justice from the Christian and Catholic perspective, and then the Buddhists, the Hindus, and so on and so forth. So we want to first prepare our network, our friends. What is climate justice from their own faith traditions perspective? Because we talk about climate justice a lot, but when I ask people what is climate justice, they're actually clueless. So we wanted to really dig in on what is the faith tradition, and then we also have what is other trainings prepare kind of building skills of people. How can we do action? How do we create a demand? And how do we actually put up our demands to our governments? And and other for example corporations. So that's it's going to be on on our agenda this few months to prepare for the action in May. And we're going to work with very grassroots from all over the world, So like, if you have your network, please join in and like check out in GreenFaith website. So we are going to have this, around mid of May, and we are obviously our main demand is to phase out fossil fuel and a just transition to everyone, because that is like our kind of like the main point of how we deal with this climate crisis at the moment. How can we shift out from all this dirty energy to clean energy, and more prosperous for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Nana. So a global mobilization coming up in the first week of May, and URI has been part of those in really powerful ways in the past, and SGI as well. So it'll be good to have a chance, we hope, to collaborate further. Lauren, what are you seeing in terms of next steps? You've got, as you said, this sort of unique situation with URI cooperation circles. What's emerging for you from your perch in terms of next steps?
I love, Nana, what you were just talking about, even from a terminology that we kind of throw these words around, climate justice. What does that mean in any specific faith tradition? What does it mean in any particular location? And we could maybe say the same thing about just transition. We don't really even have transition of any kind on the table right now. And so what does a just transition look like? What would that mean? So I am going to be doing a lot of work with cooperation circles over the next few months around how to bring different stakeholders into that conversation, so that faith groups are perhaps not feeling burdened or overwhelmed, but instead really educated and empowered in how to have conversations with, you name it, the civil leaders, the CEO, and again, how are we really getting the traction where we have it? And some of that can even be in the harder parts of this to talk about. So the disaster readiness, starting to model leadership in our resilience at a community level, and letting that be a form of our leadership too, so that we're really telling the story of, this is where we're trying to go, but this is what's real right now, and we need to be ready for it. So I think, in that space, there's tons of work for us to do. And to really do that work from a place of peace building. We know that religions do not always get along very well. We're seeing that, in a huge way right now. So in the places where we can model it, in the places that where we can really demonstrate that peace building is the foundation for the justice and for the healing, I think that's what's going to be really important. And working with you all will be my privilege and joy in trying to do this together.
Erin, circling to you, what do you see as some crucially important priorities? And we should note that you obviously are here as a leader from the Pacific Islands. You're also deeply involved in organic farming and organic agriculture. So I'm curious, from where you sit, what do you see as some key priorities and next steps?
Yeah, I think, well, for the Pacific, we are resetting and looking at our approach to the negotiations, and still holding on to the phase out of fossil fuels as a primary objective in the next COP going forward. It's critical for our survival, absolutely. One of the positive things that came out of COP was a reference in one of the final documents to our food and agriculture systems becoming more regenerative. And I think that is a really critical outcome and an area of focus. We still don't pay enough attention, I think, to the potential impact of agriculture for good in this process. Clearly, agriculture, conventional agriculture, is a significant contributor to climate change. but to be able to turn that around and make it a solution, I think we saw one of the first steps in this COP towards that. And so building on that, from IFOAM's perspective in the organic movement, is a great opportunity that we need to be able to galvanize around. So there's those two streams happening, the small pieces of opportunity we want to be able to build on in the agriculture space, but also recognizing that there is some really big rocks that we have to shift. And that's going to take an action on a lot of levels and in a lot of different ways to get that shifted. And I think that what Lauren mentioned about us being able to have discussions on what a just transition looks like is really, really critical. From the Pacific perspective, we obviously need support in being able to adapt to the changes that are already hitting us, but also fully recognize that the countries whose economies depend on fossil fuel also need support to transition away from that, because it will mean jobs, it will mean economic impact, and that is also part of a just transition. We consume all of those things, so we need support in getting off them. It's not about one group in the world, it's about everybody in the world and what it means for them. So I think that conversation might also be an important part of shifting the dial and moving the fear that many countries and industries have about moving away from fossil fuels. They can't see the alternative yet. So we need to be able to provide that.
Thanks. So in just 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to address some questions. Those of you who are listening, if you've got a question, now is the time to share it in the Q&A area. You'll see the little Q&A question bubbles at the bottom of your screen. So please, thanks to those who sent them in. And if you've got a question, pose that now. And let's dig in for a moment a bit more on the fossil fuel phase out. Karen, you mentioned that as a priority. Nana, you've mentioned that. We've all mentioned that in different ways. One initiative that has gained important traction, thanks to leadership in the Pacific as well as elsewhere, is the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And Nana, I wonder if you would like to say a little bit about what faith groups have done to support that. And Karen, you might be able to say a little bit about what Pacific Island states have done in support of that also. Nana, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, we are already sort of like campaigning on this, socialization on this treaty for the last few years with the faith communities. Especially, we are kind of like engaging like faith leaders to give support to this treaty, and then also like any faith communities around the world. So we are sort of like providing the the signatory for the faith leaders from like different part of the world to support this treaty, and also like for other faith communities, because this is very important. And then Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty it's being it's the initiative of everyone, not just like faith based community. There's a lot of groups like working on this, and then we really, I think like this is a very important treaty. If we look at the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, we can learn from that, because we thought this treaty is going to help us the transition. And as Karen mentioned that we need just transition. What does it mean in different part of the world? As also Lauren mentioned, the same thing as climate justice. So we thought this treaty is going to be very hard for us to actually push the shift to renewable energy. So then this treaty is very important. And then we need all the faith based faith leaders to support for this treaty. And then so we can to sort of prove it that many people around the world wanted to have this treaty.
Aaron, it was a number of the Pacific Island nations that were the first First Nation states to call for this treaty and to endorse this framework. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes, I think the Pacific realizes that we've got to approach these issues from many, using every tool that we've got, and that mechanism is clearly a very important one. It could be really powerful. And as Nana said, that the correlation with the nuclear I can't even say the word, proliferation treaty is really critical, because that, of course, was something that is, as a region with a nuclear legacy and the legacy of testing, we understand the power of treaties in being able to shift some of those things. So it is something that some of our countries have got behind. Also would like to reference the case to the International Court of Justice, which was led by Vanuatu. So with all of these tools are going to be important going forward for us to be able to address the really big things that aren't shifting very far in COP.
So shifting now into the questions that we've received, and many thanks to those who've sent those in. So one question from a longtime leader in the interfaith movement, Dr. Kusamita Peterson. What will be critical issues at the next COP? And how do you see faith participation building on Dubai? And I wonder, maybe toss that first, at least over to Lauren and then to Lucy, to see if you've got any thoughts on that. Critical issues for the next COP and faith participation.
I would hope that in the months between now and fall, fall in the Northern Hemisphere, that we would be sculpting some of that together. I mean, the demands, Nana, that you've referenced all are still true. And a pledge is not action. So there are all kinds of accountability questions here around what we're hearing in a conversation, and how that translates, of course, in country to country and at the grassroots level. But there's also, I think, great power in the conversations that we're having together around how we constellate ourselves and take action, even in the space of stunts, right? In what ways are we really getting attention and disobeying in good ways to create good trouble? So I think those are things that we want to be really thoughtful about, so that our movement is aligned in ways that it can make a difference and be really visible.
Lucy, what are your thoughts on priorities for the next go round, the next COP?
So something that I feel really strongly about is that we need to put greater effort in putting an end to war, conflict, and violence that are happening across our world. And there are many reasons for this, but the perspective that I'm thinking about really came from having encountering many youth from conflict affected areas at this year's COP, who I haven't ever connected with before. They've been largely not involved in this process at all. But because of the International Youth Climate Delegate Program this year, many youth from the MENA region particularly were able to come. And the stories that they were sharing just brought me to tears on a number of occasions. You know, some of these youth are coming to the COPs, and either governments are not there or not actively engaged in the process. So there is no one there to kind of look out for them and their futures. I heard stories from youth who were sharing that, you know, their friends had been killed in conflict. Their friends who were, you know, the ones who had started the Fridays for Future movements in their countries, killed in conflict. And you can just imagine, like, that's a whole future life completely just robbed. What difference that life could have made in that country completely gone because of senseless conflict and war. And not to mention the destruction to the rivers and forests that war causes. So I think the international community must come together more to stop war, conflict, and violence from happening in this world.
Thanks, Lucy. And your comments are sort of reflect a couple of questions or comments in the chat. One of them from Yannick Joseph, who notes that governments in the global south have been prevented and distracted in many ways from focusing on climate change and the energy transition because of wars, often started because of policies or interventions in the global north, and that climate justice advocates need to make sure that we frame a fossil fuel transition not as an immediate stop, but about the quickest possible transition to develop green infrastructure and renewables. I wondered, would anybody have any thoughts to add to that?
I will just say that, especially in light of what Lucy has shared about some of the danger that also accompanies this work, and the conflict that is so prevalent in many countries, that a response to your question, Fletcher, I think is it's specific to where we live. And so what feels right and relatively safe for me to do where I live could be incredibly different for someone else. And it might be why conversations like this are extra important, so that we are really hearing compassionately what is doable in those spaces, and then being really creative to customize the solutions accordingly and take steps in that way.
Thank you. Allison, I know that you're just about to come back in, and I think I may not have time for any other questions. There were some good other ones, but I should pass the microphone back to you, I think.
Yes, thank you, Fletcher. This has been a fascinating discussion. And one of the things I want to highlight is that it's so important for us all to work together. I love the idea of your global initiative. I love the idea of promoting education, especially working with youth. I think I really feel so strongly that we have an opportunity right now, this year, and maybe this year, and hopefully for the next COP, we have an opportunity, if we all work together, to put as much pressure as possible on governments and those that are into the extractive world, and to promote regenerative farming, organic farming. And education is key, but working together is what's going to really make a difference, I think. So thank you all so much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion, and I hope that we can continue to all work together. I just want to say that our next eco-justice program is going to be the Pope and the climate crisis, mobilizing 1.3 billion Catholics to address the climate emergency. And that will be on February 15th. So I hope to see you all there. And thank you, Fletcher, for a wonderful, wonderful job moderating this panel. And thank you, everyone, for all your great ideas. Take care.